back to KQNA's Talk of the Town, the Attorney General for the state of Arizona, Mark Brnovich. Mr. Attorney General, nice to have you back on.
Oh, always a pleasure, Sanford. Hopefully everyone's doing well.
Yeah, well, we just started, it just started snowing, so that's, just be glad that you're down there when you don't have to deal with that stuff.
Oh, I don't know. You know, as a kid growing up, in Phoenix area, about every 8 or 10 years we get one of those freak snowstorms, and I always thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And then when we were really lucky, you drive up to, Flagstaff or up north and you see the snow and you get to play in it, and it was always a lot of fun. So I always think when you're in Arizona and when weather gets cold, sometimes you appreciate it more than they do in other parts of the country.
Well, and this is kind of an interesting way to turn into what really caught my eye and why I invited you to come on. And it was this op-ed that you wrote in the Wall Street Journal regarding energy, and that, when you have a cold day like this and you start looking at the cost of energy and you start figuring out that, you've got to really, bear down on your energy use because of these unbelievable prices. Well, as an attorney, you're looking at this and you're seeing an antitrust violation. What does that mean exactly?
Well, possibly. Just to put this in context, I know some of the listeners that know me, they know over the years, you and I have talked about the importance of federalism and pushing back against the overreach of the federal government. And whether it was the Biden administration or the Obama administration, we have been involved in lawsuits trying to protect America's energy independence. And so whether that was suing the Biden administration over carbon rules or Obama over ozone rules, the left has had this assault on, the fossil fuel / energy industry. And we're seeing that manifest itself today. If you look at what's happening, there's a thing called the Environmental, Social, and Governance Movement. And basically this is ESG for short, and it's basically a radical left agenda. And they're using Wall Street banks and money managers to basically coordinate efforts to stop and choke off investments in the energy industry. And we know that we've seen a dramatic decrease, and just from 2019 to 2021, 25% below those investment levels in gas exploration and production. We know the Biden administration has canceled pipelines, and so the far left and the Biden administration can say what they want, but what's happening is they're kowtowing to left-wing pressure, and as a result of that, we're not exploring for more energy sources, we're not producing more energy here domestically, and you see the consequences of that. Not only when, our reliance on energy from tyrannical governments like Iran and Russia and Venezuela, but we're also seeing that as a result of decreased supply, dramatic increase in prices. All you got to do is go to the gas pump. And as you know, and your listeners know, it's not just about the price of the gas pump, because that affects the cost of, to produce groceries, for example, and to stock your store shelves. And then that has an impact on other prices. And so this has a devastating impact on our economy. So we talk about this sometimes, these issues in theory, but the reality is, as a result of far left policies and this movement, people are paying more for everything from gasoline to groceries, to what they're going to end up paying for furniture, at their house.
Now, doesn't this represent probably the most massive overtaking of our country by the executive branch? It just seems as though our legislators have been rendered powerless by the executive branch, and what, if anything, can be done to rein that in when you have an obvious situation like this where the policies that are being put into place are definitely to the disbenefit of the people as a whole?
Oh my goodness, Sanford, where do I start? And as you know, the reason why we have filed so many lawsuits against the Biden administration is because every day they are doing something new to shred the Constitution. And I know you know, because you tried to call me 2 weeks ago when I was at the U.S. Supreme Court. Right after my U.S. Supreme Court argument, I was at the U.S. Supreme Court because we'd sued the Biden administration again because they illegally withdrew the public charge rule. And we can talk about that in a second, but this is basically the policy that says if you're not a citizen, you can't get welfare benefits or government benefits. You can only get certain benefits. And the Biden administration withdrew that illegally, we argued, and as a result of that incentivizes, people to come into the country illegally. But don't forget, I was actually the first attorney general in the entire country that sued the Biden administration over the unconstitutional vaccine mandate. And, we were in federal court, and on that issue, we filed four different lawsuits against the unconstitutional vaccine mandates. And I caught a lot of flack from people that were, be out there saying, oh my gosh, you're anti-science, or you're anti-this, or anti... It's like, no, look, I'm not anti-science, I'm not anti-doctor. What I am is pro-Constitution. And nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it give the kind of unfettered power that the Biden administration is trying to exercise on everything from these carbon rules to vaccine mandates to basically unilaterally refusing to follow or, do our immigration laws or obey the immigration statutes. And as a result of that, it's not only sowing chaos in our country, but it's setting these terrible precedents. And, I remind folks all the time that if you allow the president, any president, to this kind of power under the guise of public health to say that they can require you to inject something into your body, what's next? Are they going to tell defense contractors, are going to tell Boeing employees that they can't eat cheeseburgers because that can lead to heart disease and that kills people? Or, you can't have sugary drinks if you work at Raytheon? The list goes on. And so these really are dangerous times because we are seeing the progressive far left try to consolidate as much power as quickly as possible in D.C., and whether it's nationalizing our elections, socializing our economy, or making us energy dependent on third world dictators, that's what we're seeing right now.
Well, with an election coming up this year, doesn't it seem as though this is somewhat suicidal for the left? Because clearly even people that supported the Democrats when they were elected in 2020 are abandoning their positions, saying in general, wow, this is a lot further, out of there than what I even thought it was going to be.
Yeah, look, I can't speak to what the Democrats are doing, but I do know this, is that, as an attorney general, someone who grew up here in Arizona, I have been fighting for Arizona values, and that's why I'm going to, take on Mark Kelly, because you sit there and you hit the nail on the head that even Democrats don't agree with what the party's doing in D.C., but yet Mark Kelly votes with Chuck Schumer, 98% of the time. Yet, Mark Kelly's guy, Chipman, who he was pushing to be the ATF nominee, which I opposed, and my colleagues, my fellow Attorney General, Republican Attorney General's colleagues opposed, his nomination was withdrawn as the ATF nominee by the Biden administration because he was too anti-gun. And yet that was Mark Kelly's guy. And so I think what's happening is the far left sees this as an opportunity to consolidate power in D.C., make people more dependent on D.C., and, we see the ramifications of that. Everything from, them, the federal government, people trying to jam critical race theory and the 1619 projects, into our public schools, to what's going on with energy policies, to what's going on with, our economy and all these COVID relief bills. And gosh, now that we're talking about this, just as a quick aside, we literally at the Ninth Circuit a couple weeks ago, we have a case. We sued the Biden administration over the COVID relief bill because within that bill, the boondoggle of a bill, there was literally a provision that said if a state gets COVID money, they can't cut state taxes. And so, let me ask all the listeners, and I think the answer to this, is that why is it that Washington, D.C., the bureaucrats in D.C. can send out, $1,400 stimulus checks from people from the federal government, but they don't want the state of Arizona cutting your taxes, income taxes, by $1,400? And I think the answer to that, we all know clearly, is that because they want everyone to become dependent on Washington, D.C., not only financially, but to exercise their basic rights and liberties. And, these are fights that I've been having, for my days as a young gang prosecutor to working at the Goldwater Institute, now, as the Attorney General of our state. I've been, in these battles from Jump Street, and I think it's important to have principled fighters, especially at a time like this.
Well, and certainly you have not been shy at all about getting involved in the battle at the border, and I just wondered, all this other stuff has kind of wiped that off the front page, so to speak. And so what is the current state of affairs down there? Does the state of Arizona have a legal right to be able to defend its own border?
The short answer is yes and we should. I issued a legal opinion that says that it was the first opinion in the entire country that said what is going on our southern border does constitute an invasion per the U.S. Constitution. Now, once again, I remind folks that I use the tools in my toolbox. I am the Attorney General. I'm not, the state's, commander-in-chief. That is the governor. But I do think there are additional things we could be doing as far as trying to secure that border. But let's make no mistake about this. Even though we wrote a legal opinion saying it does constitute an invasion, we've sued the Biden administration over the public charge rule, as I was just talking about, that says that if you don't have legal status, if you're non-citizen, you are limited what government benefits you can get. We've also sued the Biden administration over his failure to complete the wall. We've sued the Biden administration over his refusal to deport people with active deportation orders. So I want to let all the listeners know, think about this. Under Title 8 in the U.S. Code, it says that if you have a deportation order, you shall. It doesn't say may, it doesn't say should, it says you shall. The federal government, the executive branch, shall deport you within 90 days. There are more than 1 million people right now in this country, Sanford, with deportation orders that the Biden administration refuses to deport. So we know, in our lawsuit, we've uncovered evidence that, there are people being released from jails and prisons that have been charged and even convicted of serious crimes, and yet they're being released into our community because ICE refuses to deport them. And so that's having an impact. This last year, the first year of the Biden administration, more than 2 million people illegally entered our country. I mean, think about that. That's like the entire populations of Wyoming, Vermont, and Alaska. 3 U.S. states combined just in 1 year illegally entering our border. And then when you throw on top of it the record amount of fentanyl that's coming into our country, I mean, people are dying. I mean, not to make too much of this, but, you see the Arizona Republic has had more headlines in the past 7 days than they have in the past, 17 months when it comes to the border and what's going on, the headlines they've had regarding the terrible situation in Ukraine, but they refuse to cover the border. And yet we know that in places like Pima County, the leading cause of death now is fentanyl and opioid overdoses for, kids under 21. So literally more kids are dying from the drugs, the scourge of drugs flowing into our country from the cartels than they are from car accidents or heart attacks or even COVID, right? And yet no one talks about this. And people are dying. Last year, more than 100,000 Americans died in this country of fentanyl and opioid-related deaths. I mean, that's like almost twice as many people that died in the Vietnam War, Americans that were killed in the Vietnam War. So, I mean, there is a war going on at our southern border. The Biden administration has allowed the cartels to essentially seize control of it. So the cartels are making money, our cities are more dangerous, our kids are dying, and literally our social safety net is being overwhelmed. And with the economic collapse that the Biden administration is putting into place now, I mean, we're going to need those safety nets more than ever. So, yeah, it worries me. Look, I don't like politics. You know that. You and I have talked over the years. I don't like the games they play. I don't like the fact that, a lot of times you get some, rich guys trying to buy, seats or, and that don't really care about Arizona. And I mean, I feel like I have to, run against Mark Kelly because I love the state too much, and somebody's got to do something, and somebody's got to hold the Biden administration in check. And one of the things that I have said, and I will say again, if I were in the Senate or when I'm in the Senate, I would not vote for one single nominee. I would not vote for any single bill. I wouldn't vote for anything until the executive branch did its job and secured the border, because that's where the president's at his apex of power when it comes to border security and national security. And obviously the Biden administration and President Biden are failing. They're failing miserably, and hardworking Americans are paying the costs.
Just a couple minutes left here with Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich. I know that in addition to being the Attorney General, you're also a candidate for the U.S. Senate. So where do you fall in terms of Arizona's status on election integrity? It's obviously something that you should be concerned about, not just as the Attorney General and not just as a candidate, but also as a citizen and a voter in Arizona.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all need to ensure that everyone, whether they're a Democrat, Republican, or independent, has confidence in our election process. And I think there's no higher priority for any public official than to maintain the integrity of elections. And that's why I fought so hard in 2020 to try to defend Arizona's election integrity laws. And I think you know, and hopefully most of your listeners know, that literally culminated in Brnovich v. DNC, literally a case I argued at the U.S. Supreme Court that upheld Arizona's common sense election integrity measures that limited ballot harvesting and out-of-precinct voting. And just so people remember, the DNC had gone to a bunch of states and they filed all these different lawsuits. They tried to, for example, extend the ballot curing period. I stopped that in Arizona, but that's what part of the problem they had in Pennsylvania. We had different counties accepting different ballots at different times. And in Brnovich v. DNC, it literally is named after me, not the governor, not the president of the Senate or any legislator. Is because I stepped in to defend our laws, and I successfully won 6-3 at the U.S. Supreme Court that said states can pass election integrity measures and they can limit ballot harvesting. And as a result of that, you saw states like Georgia and Texas and other places start to enact more common sense election integrity measures. And so we've been in a lot of legal fights when it comes to election integrity and trying to defend everything that's going on. And as some of your listeners may know, the Secretary of State, this is what happens. They hire these law firms like Perkins Coie, and that's who we were up against in that DNC case. And then, whoa, what a big surprise, we get bar complaints. And so there's lawyers in our office that get bar complaints now. And this is what the left does, is that they try to demonize and destroy everyone that opposes them. But I'm going to continue to fight. I'm going to continue to fight to make sure every vote is counted. And or I think that I supported the Senate's right to conduct the audit. We said that they had the legal ability. We said their subpoenas were enforceable. I supported that in court when no other statewide elected official did. And we got the results of that audit, and we are now going through the process of reviewing the information that we've received and also following up on additional complaints that our election integrity unit received. And so I know sometimes, Sanford, that folks think it may be taking longer than they expect, but at the end of the day, process does matter, and getting it right is more important than getting it fast.
Well, and carrying the fight to the opposition is what it's really all about. I first of all, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us here on Talk of the Town. And if we had more time, we'd talk about Consumer Safety Prevention Week. But unfortunately, the world is on fire, so we got to deal with that first. And let me just say one thing, if I can. Thank you for having me on. You know how much I appreciate it. And yes, it is. One of the things that I'm most proud of, as Attorney General. It's important to fight for federalism of the Constitution, but we have recovered a record amount of restitution for Arizona consumers. And so I've always been a fighter. So whether it was taking on the Volkswagen in state court when no other AG did that, whether it was going after, utilities, whether it was, going after car companies to rip people off, we have been in the forefront of that, ensuring everyone that got tickets during COVID got a refund from Ticketmaster. So we have been there, and if people feel like they've been ripped off, they can always file a complaint at azag.gov, and wherever you are in Arizona, and if you feel like someone's ripping you off, whether it's a used car dealer or whether it's some other business, feel free to reach out to us. And this is Consumer Protection Week, so it's important to remember also anything that looks too good to be true. If it's on the internet or someone calls you on the phone, it probably is a scam. And the government, this is one thing I remind my mom and all of her friends, the government, especially during tax season, they're not going to call you and have you pay your taxes by wiring money or sending a card. The government does not call you and tell you you owe them money. That's a scam. So just remember that, if you remember one thing from the call today. Going the extra minute as well as the extra mile for our listeners. Thank you, Attorney General Mark Brnovich. We will hopefully talk to you again very soon. Thank you. Thanks. All right. Thanks, Everett. All right.